8-year-old Emma Martinez had always been curious about everything around her. Living in central London with her mother, she spent most afternoons playing in the small park near their apartment building. The park was nothing special, just a few swings, a slide, and some benches where elderly people fed pigeons. But for Emma, it was her little kingdom where she could watch the world go by. On this particular Tuesday afternoon in September, Emma was sitting on her favorite swing, gently rocking back and forth while her mother chatted with another parent nearby. The autumn sun was warm on her face, and she was enjoying the peaceful atmosphere when something caught her attention. A black van had pulled up across the street from the park, parking in a spot where vehicles rarely stopped. At first, Emma didn't think much of it. London was full of vans, delivery trucks, and commercial vehicles. But as minutes passed, she noticed something odd. The van just sat there, engine running, with someone inside who never got out. The windows were tinted, making it impossible to see clearly inside, but she could make out the shadow of a person in the driver's seat. Emma's mother had always taught her to be aware of her surroundings. She had explained about stranger danger and how important it was to notice things that seemed out of place. This van definitely seemed out of place. There was no delivery to make, no business nearby that would require someone to park there, and no reason for anyone to just sit in a running vehicle for so long. As Emma continued to swing gently, she kept glancing over at the mysterious van. 20 minutes had passed, then 30. The person inside hadn't moved, hadn't gotten out, and the engine kept running. Other children in the park were playing loudly, their laughter filling the air. But Emma found herself distracted by this strange presence across the street. What made it even more unusual was the van's position. It was parked in such a way that whoever was inside had a perfect view of the entire park. They could see every child playing, every parent sitting on the benches, and every person who came and went. Emma began to feel uncomfortable, though she couldn't quite explain why. The young girl had heard stories on the news about people who weren't safe to be around, especially around children. Her school had even had special assemblies about staying safe and recognizing dangerous situations. Something about this van and its mysterious occupant was triggering all those safety warnings in her mind. Emma looked around the park more carefully now. There were about a dozen children playing, ranging from toddlers to kids her own age. Their parents and caregivers were scattered around on benches, most of them engaged in conversations or looking at their phones. Nobody else seemed to have noticed the black van or found it concerning. But Emma noticed something else that made her heart beat faster. In the distance, she could see the familiar red uniforms and tall black hats of the Royal Guard. They were probably changing shifts at one of the nearby royal buildings, a common sight in this part of London. The guards always walked in formation, their faces serious and professional, their movements precise and purposeful. Emma had always been fascinated by the Royal Guard. Her mother had told her stories about how brave and dedicated they were, how they protected important people and places, and how they were trained to notice things that others might miss. As she watched them approaching along the street, an idea began to form in her young mind. The van had now been sitting there for almost 45 minutes. The person inside still hadn't moved, and Emma's discomfort was growing stronger. She tried to focus on playing, but her eyes kept drifting back to the mysterious vehicle. Something wasn't right, and she could feel it in her stomach like a knot of worry. Emma slipped off her swing and walked over to where her mother was sitting. She tugged gently on her mother's sleeve, trying to get her attention without being rude to the other adult she was talking to. When her mother looked down at her with a questioning expression, Emma pointed discreetly toward the black van across the street. Her mother followed her gaze and looked at the van for a moment, but didn't seem to share Emma's concern. To an adult, it might have just looked like someone waiting for a friend or taking a phone call, but Emma's young eyes had been watching carefully, and she knew this was different. This was wrong. The Royal Guard was getting closer now, their formation moving steadily down the street. Emma made a decision that would prove to be incredibly important. Despite being just 8 years old, she was going to trust her instincts and take action. She had noticed something that the adults around her had missed or dismissed, and she wasn't going to ignore the uncomfortable feeling in her stomach. Emma told her mother she wanted to walk to the edge of the park, closer to the street. Her mother agreed, thinking her daughter just wanted a change of scenery. But Emma had a much more specific purpose in mind. She was going to approach the Royal Guard and tell them about the suspicious van that had been watching the children's park for almost an hour. Emma walked slowly toward the edge of the park, her heart beating faster with each step. She had never spoken to a royal guard before, and she wasn't entirely sure they would listen to a young girl, but something deep inside her knew that what she was seeing wasn't normal. And if the adults around her weren't going to pay attention, maybe these trained protectors would. As the formation of guards approached, Emma could see their serious expressions beneath the shadow of their iconic bearskin hats. Their red tunics were perfectly pressed, their black boots polished to a mirror shine, and their movements synchronized like a well-rehearsed dance. These were people who noticed everything, people whose job it was to spot trouble before it became dangerous. When the guards were close enough, Emma stepped forward, though not too close to block their path. She raised her small hand and spoke in her clearest, most polite voice. The lead guard, a tall man with kind eyes despite his stern expression, noticed her immediately and raised his hand to signal the formation to slow their pace. Emma quickly explained what she had been observing. She told the guard about the black van that had been parked across from the children's park for nearly an hour, about the person inside who never got out, and about how the van was positioned to have a perfect view of all the children playing. She spoke rapidly but clearly, her words tumbling out as she tried to convey the urgency of what she felt. The guard listened intently to every word. While other adults might have dismissed a child's concerns, this man was trained to take all potential threats seriously, regardless of the source of the information. He had seen enough in his years of service to know that sometimes the most innocent observers noticed the most important details. After Emma finished speaking, the guard thanked her politely and asked her to point out exactly which van she meant. Emma turned and pointed across the street to the black vehicle, which was still sitting in the same spot with its engine running. The guard's eyes followed her direction, and immediately his expression became more focused and alert. The guard quickly but quietly communicated with his colleagues using subtle hand signals that Emma didn't understand but found fascinating to watch. Within seconds, the entire formation had shifted from their casual patrol stance to something more purposeful and tactical. They didn't want to cause panic or draw attention to themselves, but they were clearly taking Emma's observation very seriously. One of the guards discreetly pulled out a small radio device and began speaking in low, coded language. Emma couldn't understand most of what he was saying, but she caught a few words like suspicious, vehicle, surveillance, and immediate response, required. The guards were calling for backup and additional security measures without making it obvious to anyone else what was happening. Meanwhile, the guard who had first spoken to Emma knelt down to her eye level and asked her a few more questions. How long had she been watching the van? Had she seen anyone get in or out? Did she notice if the person inside had any equipment or was taking pictures? Emma answered each question thoughtfully, surprised by how much detail she had actually observed during her careful watching. The guard was impressed by Emma's detailed observations and her ability to articulate exactly what she had seen. Many adults would have missed these subtle details or dismissed them as unimportant, but Emma's natural curiosity and her mother's teachings about staying aware had made her the perfect witness to something that was indeed very concerning. As they talked, more security personnel began arriving in the area, though they did so discreetly. Plainclothes officers appeared on nearby street corners. Additional patrol units positioned themselves strategically around the park, and surveillance experts with specialized equipment began setting up observation points. All of this was happening quietly and professionally, without causing alarm to the families enjoying their afternoon in the park. Emma watched in amazement as the simple act of reporting what she had seen triggered this coordinated response. She began to understand that her observation might have been more important than she had initially realized. The adults around her were treating the situation with extreme seriousness, moving with the kind of precision and urgency that suggested real danger. The original guard who had listened to Emma's report continued to stay near her and her mother, who had now joined them and was learning about the situation for the first time. Emma's mother was initially surprised and then proud that her daughter had been so observant and brave enough to speak up about her concerns. As the security operation unfolded around them, Emma found herself at the center of what was becoming a significant investigation. Her simple observation of a suspicious van had set in motion a response involving multiple law enforcement agencies and security services. The young girl was beginning to realize that sometimes the smallest voice could make the biggest difference in keeping people safe. Within 15 minutes of Emma's report, the area around the park had transformed into a carefully orchestrated security operation. Trained officers had taken positions at every possible exit route from the street, where the black van remained parked. Surveillance teams with high-powered cameras and listening equipment had established monitoring points from nearby buildings and concealed locations. The van's occupant seemed unaware of the attention they had attracted. From Emma's position at the edge of the park, she could still see the shadow of the person inside, apparently still focused on watching the children and families in the recreational area. The engine continued running, and there was no sign that the individual knew they were now the subject of intensive police scrutiny. A senior detective in plain clothes approached Emma and her mother, introducing himself quietly and professionally. He explained that they were taking the situation very seriously, and that Emma's detailed observations had provided crucial information for their assessment. He asked if they would be willing to stay in the area for a little while longer, as Emma's continued observations might help them understand the suspect's intentions and behavior patterns. Emma felt both nervous and excited about being involved in what was clearly becoming a real police investigation. The detective asked her to continue watching the van, but to do so casually, as if she were just playing in the park. If the person inside noticed unusual police activity or realized they were being watched, they might flee before authorities could determine what they were planning or gather enough evidence for any potential charges. The young girl positioned herself on a bench where she could maintain a clear view of the suspicious vehicle while appearing to be simply resting during her playtime. Her mother sat beside her, also keeping watch while trying to appear natural and relaxed. Both of them were amazed by how quickly their ordinary afternoon had transformed into something much more significant and potentially dangerous. As Emma continued her observation, she began noticing additional details that she shared with the nearby detective. The person in the van occasionally lifted what appeared to be a camera or recording device, pointing it toward different areas of the park. They seemed particularly interested in the playground equipment, where the youngest children were playing, and they spent considerable time focusing on the entrance and exit points of the recreational area. These observations were immediately relayed to the command center that had been established in a nearby building. Intelligence analysts were working to identify the van's registration, determine if it had been reported in connection with any previous incidents, and research whether similar vehicles had been spotted near other parks or schools in recent weeks. The investigation was revealing disturbing patterns. Computer searches showed that a black van matching this description had been reported near 3 other children's recreational areas in different parts of London over the previous month. In each case, witnesses had noticed the vehicle remaining stationary for extended periods, with occupants who appeared to be observing or recording the activities of children and families. Emma's report had provided the breakthrough that law enforcement needed to connect these separate incidents and begin building a comprehensive case. Her careful attention to detail and willingness to speak up had potentially prevented something terrible from happening, not just at this park but possibly at other locations as well. The tactical team was now preparing for the next phase of their operation. They had gathered enough evidence to justify approaching the vehicle and questioning its occupant. Specialized officers trained in handling potentially dangerous individuals were positioning themselves to ensure the suspect could not escape or harm anyone if they attempted to flee. Emma watched as unmarked police cars began moving into position around the van, though they maintained enough distance to avoid alerting the suspect. The coordination was impressive to observe, with officers communicating through hand signals and radio devices to ensure everyone was prepared for whatever might happen when they made contact with the individual inside the vehicle. The detective thanked Emma again for her vigilance and bravery, explaining that situations like this often relied on ordinary citizens who were willing to report suspicious behavior. He told her that her actions today might prevent other children from being put in danger, and that she should be proud of her courage in speaking up when she noticed something wrong. As the operation prepared to move into its active phase, Emma felt a mixture of pride and nervousness. She had never imagined that her simple observation would lead to such a significant police response. But she was beginning to understand that her decision to trust her instincts and report what she had seen might have far-reaching consequences for community safety. The moment everyone had been preparing for finally arrived. The tactical team leader gave a subtle signal, and unmarked police vehicles began moving simultaneously from multiple directions toward the black van. The operation was designed to prevent any possibility of escape, while ensuring the safety of all civilians in the area, especially the children still playing in nearby park areas. Emma watched with fascination and growing tension as the carefully planned operation unfolded before her eyes. The police vehicles approached the van smoothly and professionally, boxing it in from all sides within a matter of seconds. The driver of the suspicious vehicle suddenly realized what was happening, and Emma could see frantic movement inside the van as the person appeared to be trying to hide or destroy something. Armed officers emerged from the police cars with practiced precision, their movements coordinated and purposeful. They approached the van with weapons drawn but pointed safely downward, ready to respond to any threat while hoping to resolve the situation peacefully. One officer used a megaphone to instruct the van's occupant to turn off the engine, exit the vehicle slowly, and keep their hands visible at all times. For several tense moments, nothing happened. The person inside the van remained motionless, apparently weighing their options and considering whether to comply with police commands or attempt some form of resistance. Emma held her breath, unconsciously gripping her mother's hand as they watched the standoff develop across the street from their position. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 2 or 3 minutes, the van's door opened slowly. A middle-aged man emerged with his hands raised, following the officer's instructions carefully. Emma could see that he appeared nervous and agitated, but he was complying with the police commands without making any threatening movements. The suspect was immediately secured by the tactical team, handcuffed, and placed under arrest. While some officers focused on the individual, others began carefully examining the interior of the van. Emma watched as they discovered and carefully removed what appeared to be camera equipment, recording devices, and a laptop computer from the vehicle. The detective who had been coordinating with Emma approached her position and provided a brief update on what they had found. The van contained sophisticated surveillance equipment including telephoto lenses, digital recording devices, and computer storage systems. The suspect had indeed been systematically photographing and recording the children in the park, and preliminary examination suggested this had been going on for an extended period. Even more concerning, initial searches of the computer equipment revealed similar recordings from other parks and recreational areas around London. Emma's observation had helped uncover what appeared to be a systematic operation targeting children in multiple locations across the city. The implications were serious, and the investigation would likely expand significantly as authorities analyzed all the recovered evidence. Emma felt a complex mixture of emotions as she processed this information. She was proud that her careful attention and willingness to speak up had led to stopping someone who was clearly engaged in inappropriate and potentially dangerous behavior. At the same time, she was somewhat overwhelmed by the seriousness of what had been discovered and the role she had played in the investigation. The park area was now being treated as a crime scene, with forensic specialists documenting evidence and interviewing witnesses. Other families who had been in the park during the suspect's surveillance period were being contacted to provide statements and to be informed about what had occurred. The investigation was expanding rapidly as authorities worked to understand the full scope of the suspect's activities. Emma's mother was approached by several investigators who wanted to document her daughter's observations more formally. They explained that Emma's detailed witness account would be crucial evidence in any legal proceedings that resulted from the arrest. The young girl would need to provide a formal statement, describing exactly what she had observed and when she had noticed the suspicious behaviors. The immediate crisis situation resolved and the suspect was transported away for questioning. Emma began to understand that her role in this investigation was far from over. Her observations had been the key to stopping a potentially dangerous individual, but now she would need to help authorities build the strongest possible case to ensure appropriate legal consequences. In the days following the arrest, Emma found herself at the center of a much larger investigation than anyone had initially realized. The suspect, identified as Marcus Henley, a 45-year-old man with no previous criminal record, had been operating what authorities discovered was an extensive surveillance network targeting children's recreational areas across London and surrounding communities. The computer equipment recovered from Henley's van contained thousands of photographs and video recordings, collected over a period of more than 8 months. Investigators found evidence that he had systematically visited dozens of different parks, playgrounds, schools, and family recreation areas, spending hours at each location documenting the activities and routines of children and their families. Emma was asked to provide a detailed formal statement to investigators, with her mother present throughout the process. A specially trained officer who worked with child witnesses helped Emma describe exactly what she had observed, when she had first noticed the van, and what specific behaviors had made her feel uncomfortable about the situation. The detective in charge of the case explained to Emma and her mother that her observations had been remarkably accurate and detailed. Her ability to notice and articulate the suspicious aspects of Henley's behavior had provided investigators with crucial evidence about his methods and intentions. Without her report, he might have continued his surveillance activities indefinitely. Further investigation revealed that Henley had been planning to escalate his activities beyond simple observation and recording. Searches of his residence uncovered detailed maps of various neighborhoods, schedules of children's activities, and research into security measures at different recreational facilities. Intelligence analysts concluded that he appeared to be conducting reconnaissance. For more serious criminal activities, Emma learned that her decision to speak up had potentially prevented not just continued surveillance, but possibly more dangerous crimes against children in her community and beyond. The investigation had uncovered evidence suggesting that Henley was part of a larger network of individuals engaged in similar activities, and his arrest was leading to additional investigations and arrests in other cities. The young girl was invited to meet with senior police officials, who wanted to personally thank her for her vigilance and courage. They explained that cases like this often depended on ordinary citizens who were willing to report suspicious behavior, and that her actions demonstrated the importance of teaching children to trust their instincts when something didn't feel right. Emma's story began attracting attention from local media outlets, though her family was careful to protect her privacy, while still allowing her heroic actions to be recognized. News reports described how an observant 8-year-old girl had helped uncover a significant criminal operation through her careful attention to unusual behavior in her neighborhood park, the Royal Guard member who had first listened to Emma's report also visited her family to personally commend her actions. He explained that her willingness to approach security personnel and clearly communicate her concerns had demonstrated exactly the kind of community awareness that helped keep everyone safe. He presented Emma with a special commendation recognizing her contribution to public safety school. Officials at Emma's primary school invited her to speak to other students about the importance of being aware of their surroundings and reporting suspicious behavior to trusted adults. Emma was initially nervous about speaking to groups, but she found that sharing her experience helped other children understand how they could contribute to community safety. The case against Marcus Henley proceeded through the legal system, with Emma's witness testimony serving as key evidence in establishing the timeline and methods of his surveillance activities. Her detailed observations helped prosecutors demonstrate the systematic and predatory nature of his behavior, supporting more serious charges and penalties. As the legal proceedings continued, Emma began to understand the long-term impact of her actions. Her simple decision to trust her instincts and speak up about something that made her uncomfortable had led to the protection of countless other children and the disruption of a criminal network that might have operated for years without detection. 6 months after Emma's initial observation led to Marcus Henley's arrest, the full scope of the criminal network had been revealed through extensive investigation. Henley had been sentenced to 12 years in prison for his surveillance activities and planning more serious crimes against children. His arrest had led to the discovery of similar operations in 4 other cities, resulting in additional arrests and convictions. Emma had become something of a local hero. Though she remained humble about her role in the investigation, she continued attending her regular school and playing in the same park, where she had first noticed the suspicious van. But now she did so with the knowledge that her actions had made her community significantly safer for all children and families. The case had prompted changes in security procedures at parks and recreational facilities throughout London. New protocols were established for reporting suspicious behavior, and community awareness programs were expanded to help both children and adults recognize potential threats. Emma's story became a central part of these educational efforts. Emma received numerous awards in recognition for her bravery and civic responsibility. The Mayor of London presented her with a special commendation for outstanding community service. The Metropolitan Police honored her with their Civilian Recognition Award. Most meaningfully to Emma, she received a personal letter from members of the royal family, thanking her for her vigilance and courage. The young girl used her newfound recognition to advocate for children's safety education programs. She worked with school officials and community organizations to develop age-appropriate materials that taught other children how to recognize suspicious behavior and report their concerns to trusted adults. Her message was simple but powerful. Trust your instincts and speak up when something doesn't feel right. Emma's mother was incredibly proud of her daughter's actions and the maturity she had shown throughout the entire experience. The incident had strengthened their relationship and reinforced the importance of the safety lessons they had discussed over the years. Emma's willingness to act on what she had learned demonstrated that children could be effective partners in community safety when given proper guidance and support. The park where everything began installed a small memorial plaque recognizing Emma's contribution to community safety, though it was placed discreetly to avoid making her uncomfortable with too much attention. The plaque simply read, "Dedicated to the power of observation and the courage to speak up for the safety of others." As Emma grew older, she maintained her interest in community safety and helping others. She joined her school's safety patrol program and volunteered with local organizations that worked to protect children. Her experience with the surveillance case had given her a deep appreciation for the importance of ordinary citizens taking responsibility for the well-being of their communities. The investigation that began with Emma's simple observation continued to have lasting impact years later. The evidence gathered from Marcus Henley's operation helped law enforcement develop better methods for detecting and preventing similar crimes. Training programs for police officers now included specific modules on recognizing patterns of predatory surveillance behavior. Emma's story became part of the curriculum in schools throughout the region, teaching children that their voices matter and that adults will listen when they report legitimate safety concerns. Her experience demonstrated that age is not a barrier to making important contributions to community protection, and that sometimes the most observant witnesses are those who others might overlook. Looking back on that autumn afternoon when she first noticed the black van, Emma understood that her decision to speak up had changed not only her own life, but the lives of countless other children and families. Her simple act of courage had proven that when people care enough to pay attention and brave enough to take action, even the youngest members of a community can make an extraordinary difference in keeping everyone safe. The lesson she learned that day, that every person has the power to protect others simply by being alert and speaking up, became a principle that guided her throughout her life.